president can't do it. So that's not even a discussion.
Nancy Pelosi told a huge lie in an apparent defense of why Joe Biden hasn't yet canceled all student debt. So I'm going to play this clip here. There's also a second clip to cover as well. But this first clip, this is just not true.
People think that the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress. And I don't even like to call it forgiveness because that implies a transgression. It's not to be forgiven. Just freeing people from those obligations. So the question of who gets forgiven, to use the term of art that is out there, is a debate. Do we use whatever money there is for the broadest base of support of those with more people with even less debt or fewer people with more debt? That's a policy discussion. But the difference between the president can't do it. So that's not even a discussion. Not everybody realizes that, but the president can only postpone, delay, but not forgive.
All right, in a second here, I'll get to exactly why Nancy Pelosi is wrong, but I have to mention something she brought up at the beginning of these remarks, that she doesn't even like to call it forgiveness because that implies a transgression. You are so focused. I mean, this is everything wrong with Democratic leadership, so focused on symbolism, on apparently offending people that may be bothered by the word forgiveness and debt forgiveness. I've never met anyone that's been offended by that, but here she is, so focused on that, while at the same time being against debt forgiveness. So you don't actually want to help anybody in their actual lives, but you will focus on the word and the symbolism of it all. It is so ridiculous. Now, let me get to why Nancy Pelosi is wrong with a very detailed and somewhat boring explanation, but she is wrong. So this from the American Prospect. The answer, according to Luke Herron, a PhD student in law at Yale, lies with an obscure statute dating back to the Eisenhower presidency known as Compromise and Settlement Authority. This authority was granted to the Department of Education first in 1958 and then codified further in the Higher Education Act of 1965. Herron, who recently finished a public draft of a paper on the subject, explains in an interview that compromise and settlement operates similarly to the concept of prosecutorial discretion, a whole line of jurisprudence that is not really something that the courts can question. For example, if someone hits your car, you have standing to sue, but there's nothing that says you must sue. Similarly, the Department of Education can just decide not to collect on student loans. Compromise and settlement gives the Education Department this explicit authority. Herron writes, quote, Education Department has absolute discretion to determine when to stop collections, when to collect less than the full amount, and when to release debtors' claims in toto, which is just a fancy way of saying in whole. So, yes, I guess technically, Joe Biden personally doesn't cancel student debt, but he can direct the Education Department to do so. They have the authority. They do not need Congress, as Nancy Pelosi claims they do. So that is just a complete lie. And they've already done this, so at least in small parts. So on March 18th, the U.S. Education Department announced that roughly 72,000 student loan borrowers who were defrauded by diploma mill for-profit colleges would get full relief on their outstanding debt, as opposed to the partial means-tested relief awarded during the tenure of former Secretary Betsy DeVos. This could grant up to $1 billion in student loan in students who attended for-profit college chains Corinthian and ITT Technical Institute. So they've already canceled some student debt without needing Congress. Biden can do the whole thing. And think of the benefit. This is why this is a big issue. Think of the benefit of this. It would immediately improve the credit scores of these student loan borrowers, freeing them up to maybe buy a car, buy a house, start a family. One of the biggest barriers to millennials right now starting a life are their student loans. So this would be a huge weight off of the shoulders of millions, and Biden has the ability to do that. And by the way, there's been a pause on student loans since the beginning of the pandemic. Was there all these, news stories about how it's destroying the economy? No, because they don't actually need the student loans to keep things going. So they can cancel all this debt, allow people to start their lives, and They refuse to do so. Now, let me get to one last clip here. This is a short one, but I just have to bring up how Pelosi right here is clearly using a Republican talking point.
Suppose your family was not, your child just decided they want to, at this time, not want to go to college, but you're paying taxes to forgive somebody else's obligations. You may not be happy about that.
This is literally just an anti-government Republican talking point. You pay into the fire department, even though your house may not catch fire. You pay into the roads that are built, even though you may not use those roads or have a car. You pay into education, even though you may not have kids. This is just the reality of how society operates. But here she is using an anti-government Republican talking point to throw out the idea of canceling student loan debt. I think people would be a lot more bothered, or are a lot more bothered by their taxes going to paying for U.S.-backed wars and Wall Street bailouts than they would be their taxes going to education or healthcare or anything that actually helps people. But Nancy Pelosi, House Leader, Democrat, one of the major obstacles to any progress to a Democratic Party that, you know, at some point could actually help people if they got rid of leadership like Pelosi and others who are in the way.